Welcome to the channel or welcome back. Today's video is focused on white-collar crime at the highest level. The scale of these crimes involved billions of dollars. Let's get into the video. In recent months, the White House has been quietly reviewing thousands of clemency requests, but a handful of names stand out. A disgraced Silicon Valley founder, a Wall Street trader whose bets collapsed global banks, and a Goldman Sachs banker at the center of one of the largest corruption scandals in modern history. All three were convicted of serious financial crimes. All three are serving or facing long prison sentences, and all three are now seeking presidential pardons or sentence commutations. Tonight, we're breaking down who they are, how their crimes worked, how they were caught, what they were convicted of, and whether a presidential pardon could realistically change their futures. This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes, Bill Hwang, and Tim Leissner, and how power, money, and influence collide with the justice system. Bill Hwang and Archegos Capital background and Wall Street career. Sung Kook. Bill Hwang was once a billionaire hedge fund manager and protege of Tiger Management founder Julian Robertson. According to publications, he was born in South Korea in 1964 and moved to Las Vegas with his parents in 1982. His first job was working in the kitchen at a McDonald's on the Sin City Strip. His father died within a year of arriving in America. His mother decided to relocate to Los Angeles, and Hwang enrolled at the University of California, where he studied for a bachelor's degree in economics. Afterward, he further attended Carnegie Mellon University's prestigious MBA program, setting him on course for a career in business. His first job after university was working as a stock salesman for a South Korean financial services company, Hyundai Securities in New York City. H's career catapulted after meeting and working with Julian Robertson. Robertson managed and helped finance Hwang's very own hedge fund, Tiger Asia Management. Tiger Asia was known by industry experts for making huge, risky bets on stocks, mainly in South Korea, Japan, China, and other Asian countries, using heavily leveraged debts. The company's actions often put them in issues with financial regulators. After an insider trading settlement in 2012, Hwang was banned from managing public funds. He reinvented himself by launching Archegos Capital, a private family office. Archegos used a complex financial tool called total return swaps, allowing Hwang to borrow massive sums, hide stock positions from regulators, leverage billions with minimal collateral. Banks involved included Credit Suisse, Nomura, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. Archegos managed to amass net assets of $3.9 billion, and at its highest point, its total assets were valued at an estimated $36 billion. During COVID-19 lockdown, Hwang used leverage to build a significant position in the U.S. media company Viacom-CBS. This caused shares in Viacom-CBS to skyrocket. By January 2021, Viacom-CBS stock was trading in excess of treble its original share price. Hwang carried on investing in the stock, driving it past the $100 mark, eventually growing his position to more than $20 billion. His investment strategy meant the heads of Viacom-CBS had no idea who was behind the stock's performance. Viacom-CBS executives, in an attempt to benefit from the stock's performance, decided to fundraise by selling new shares to the public. The company announced the offering on 22 March 2021, hoping it would generate around $3 billion and provide a welcome funding injection for the firm's streaming services. It's been reported that Hwang was planning to buy hundreds of millions of dollars worth of shares. However, on the other side of the world, two other stocks he had significant stakes in had crashed in the Asian markets. The fundraising did not reach its intended goal, and in response, investors began dumping their Viacom-CBS stock, and the company's share price fell sharply. After share prices collapsed, the margin call exposed Archegos for not having the liquidity required to satisfy its lenders. The result? A rapid market collapse. Over $10 billion in losses for global banks. Credit Suisse was later absorbed by UBS. Investigation, trial and sentence. In 2024, a jury convicted Hwang of securities fraud, wire fraud, market manipulation. The SEC started looking into the dealings of Archegos after the company's crash. The ripple effect from market activity of this magnitude was not likely to go unnoticed. A preliminary investigation began at the end of March 2021 and broadened as allegations massive market manipulation scheme surfaced. The SEC alleged that Hwang's actions were intended to artificially and dramatically drive up the prices of the various companies' securities, which induced other investors to purchase those securities at inflated prices. He was also accused, with his co-conspirators, to have lied to banks to obtain the funds for their scheme. Federal agents arrested Hwang in April 2022. Also arrested were Patrick Halligan, Archegos' former chief financial officer, Scott Becker, the fund's chief risk officer, and head trader William Tomita. Both Hwang and Halligan were charged with racketeering, conspiracy, securities fraud, and wire fraud offenses. Becker and Tomita negotiated deals for themselves with prosecutors and went on to testify against their former boss and Archegos' ex-CFO. Hwang and Halligan decided to fight their corner and pleaded not guilty to the federal charges. Hwang was eventually convicted for 10 of the 11 charges against him, each of which carries a maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment. Halligan was found guilty of wire fraud, conspiracy, and securities fraud. Hwang was sentenced to 18 years in prison, one of the longest white-collar sentences in U.S. history. It could have been even worse, though. Each charge had a maximum sentence of 20 years. If he was given consecutive sentences, it could have amounted to a sentence of 200 years. Pardon attempt and interesting facts. Hwang has applied for a presidential pardon while appealing his conviction. There has been no official response from the government, but reports suggest an application has been made. Interesting facts. Archegos never disclosed its true exposure to the markets. Multiple banks independently failed risk checks as a result of their dealings with Archegos. The collapse is still reshaping hedge fund regulation debates. It was estimated that Hwang amassed a $20 billion fortune at the time of his firm's collapse, an outstanding accomplishment for someone from such humble beginnings. It has been reported that his fortune was mostly liquid and easy to spend. By the time his company went under, most of it seems to have vanished. Tim Leissner and the 1MDB scandal. Tim Leissner was a senior Goldman Sachs banker and chairman of their Southeast Asia operations. He joined the firm in 1998 and then became chief of staff to Richard Ginode, who was at the time president of the bank's Asia operations. He was born on October 31, 1971, in Germany, and his father was an experienced Volkswagen executive. He earned a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Siegen in 1991 and an MBA from the University of Hartford in Connecticut in 1992. From then, he went on to pursue a career in finance. Leissner got a big break in 2002. A Goldman Sachs advisor caused offense with a blunt statement he made in a presentation for a client bidding to take over a bank. Hank Paulson, chief executive officer at the time, flew to Singapore for damage control. Leissner became the firm's local head of investment banking a few months later. In May 2006, Leissner was sitting on stage when the conglomerate controlled by billionaire Syed Mokhtar al-Bukhari announced its takeover of power producer Malakoff BHD. Goldman Sachs was an advisor on the deal, and that year, Leissner made partner. He was very ambitious and wanted to do more in Malaysia. By the end of 2009, Goldman Sachs was approved to start fund management and corporate finance in the country. Leissner became the firm's Southeast Asia chairman in 2014. He helped arrange bond deals for Malaysia's State Investment Fund, 1MDB, raising $6.5 billion. How the corruption worked. More than $4.5 billion was stolen through bribes, kickbacks, offshore shell companies. Controversy surrounded the money 1MDB raised and whether it was spent as intended on local projects or siphoned off. Malaysia's Attorney General alleged that the Prime Minister got $681 million as a gift from the Saudi royal family and returned $620 million. Swiss prosecutors asked Malaysia to help investigating 1MDB, suspecting that $4 billion may have been misappropriated. It has been reported that Goldman Sachs did their own internal investigation and found that Leissner did nothing wrong. However, Goldman Sachs kept a close monitor of Leissner after he got involved in a deal with a former brokerage head convicted of corruption in 2004. His conviction was overturned in 2013, but the aesthetics did not look good for the company. In 2016, Tim Leissner's career unraveled after Goldman Sachs discovered he had issued an unauthorized recommendation letter prompting his swift resignation. 2 years later, he was arrested in Washington, D.C. and pleaded guilty to conspiring to launder money and breaching foreign anti-bribery laws. Leissner admitted to helping channel bribes to senior officials in Malaysia and Abu Dhabi, with around $200 million in misappropriated funds linked to him and his associates, including fugitive financier Joe Low. As part of his plea agreement, he agreed to pay a $43.7 million fine and forfeit assets, including 3.3 million shares in Celsius, once valued at about $93 million. The money funded luxury yachts, art, mansions, Hollywood films like The Wolf of Wall Street. Key figures included Malaysian officials, fugitive financier Joe Low. Leissner pleaded guilty in 2018 and became the star witness against fellow banker Roger Ng. Despite prosecutors seeking leniency, a judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison, calling his conduct brazen and audacious. However, his legal troubles continued, with civil lawsuits filed by Ng and former Def Jam head Russell Simmons alleging fraud and theft of investments. Pardon bid and interesting facts. Leissner has applied for a whole presidential pardon ahead of surrendering to prison. If successful, he would avoid spending any time in prison for his offenses. Interesting facts. Goldman paid over $5 billion in global penalties. Malaysia's former Prime Minister was imprisoned. Leissner admitted to spending $60 million on personal luxuries. Leissner was married to the ex-wife of one of his accusers in his civil lawsuit. Kimora Lee Simmons was married to former Def Jam executive Russell Simmons. Leissner and Simmons's marriage was precarious, as it is alleged that he was still married to another woman at the same time. Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, background and rise. Elizabeth Holmes founded Theranos in 2003, at just 19 years old after dropping out of Stanford. She was born in 1984 and came from a family of academics. She was a great admirer of Steve Jobs and modeled herself after him as she started on her journey into entrepreneurship. She mimicked Jobs, particularly his storytelling ability, using her charm and charisma to garner significant interest and secure investments in her startup. She claimed to have invented revolutionary blood testing technology capable of running hundreds of medical tests from a single finger prick of blood. By the mid-2010s, Theranos was valued at an estimated $9 billion. Holmes was hailed as the next Steve Jobs. She appeared on the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Time. High-profile investors included Rupert Murdoch, Larry Ellison, and Henry Kissinger. How the fraud worked. Behind the scenes, Theranos' technology did not actually work as claimed. Most blood tests were secretly run on traditional machines made by other companies. Holmes and her executives lied to investors about accuracy, fabricated reports bearing pharmaceutical company logos, claimed false military and Department of Defense use, inflated revenue projections by hundreds of millions of dollars. Patients in some cases were said to have received false or unreliable medical results, including cancer screenings and pregnancy tests. Investigation and collapse. The downfall began in 2015 when Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou exposed internal whistleblower accounts. Regulators soon followed. Theranos retracted its tests, recalled machines, shut down operations. Holmes was charged in 2018. During the trial, Holmes accused her ex-boyfriend and business partner, Ramesh Balwani, of emotional abuse and SA at the time of the alleged crimes, impairing her mental state. Balwani, 56, who faced the same fraud charges, was also convicted. He described her claims outrageous. Holmes's drawn-out legal process and pregnancies. It took a long time for Holmes to be brought to justice. There were several factors that affected proceedings. Holmes's criminal trial was delayed multiple times for a combination of reasons, including the COVID-19 pandemic, court scheduling issues, pregnancy. She was expecting her first child in mid-2021 while the case was pending. When she was convicted in January 2022 and sentenced in November 2022, she was visibly pregnant with her second child, and the judge intentionally set her surrender date months later, April 27, 2023, so she could give birth before reporting to prison. Her lawyers later asked the court to delay the start of her prison term, citing her role as a mother of two very young children and ongoing appeals, although prosecutors strongly opposed this. These pregnancies and related motions contributed to the extended timeline of the case, from indictment to trial sentencing and reporting to prison, although a judge ultimately ruled she was not a flight risk and set firm surrender dates. Allegation of attempted flight. In January 2022, shortly after her conviction, federal prosecutors filed court documents stating that Holmes had booked a one-way flight to Mexico departing January 26, 2022, with no scheduled return. According to the prosecution, this was evidence she may have been trying to leave the United States after being convicted, but before being sentenced. That ticket was cancelled only after the government raised the booking with her defense team. Prosecutors argued that, had the government not intervened, it was unclear whether she would not have attempted to use the flight. Holmes' yes defense countered that she had booked the ticket before the verdict with the intention of attending a friend's wedding, and that she never actually tried to travel or possess a valid passport at the time. The judge accepted the defense's explanation and rejected the argument that she was a flight risk when deciding bail and surrender conditions. The one-way Mexico ticket allegation was widely reported and became part of the government's argument about bail conditions, though it was ultimately interpreted by the court as ill-advised rather than malicious. In 2022, Holmes was convicted of wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud investors. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $452 million in restitution. She is currently incarcerated in Texas. Pardon bid and interesting facts. Holmes has now asked President Trump to commute her sentence, arguing excessive punishment. Interesting facts. She modeled her voice, clothing, and image on Steve Jobs. Theranos technology was internally called a mirage by judges. Even after conviction, Holmes has publicly denied intent to deceive. How presidential pardons work. The U.S. Constitution grants presidents broad clemency powers, including pardons, sentence commutations. Applications go through the office of the pardon attorney, but presidents can bypass the process. Pardons do not require admission of guilt, do not erase convictions, often reflect political philosophy. Critics argue the process favors the wealthy, the connected, high-profile cases. Supporters say it corrects judicial overreach. These 3 cases raise uncomfortable questions. Who deserves mercy? Does cooperation outweigh harm? And should financial crimes that devastate lives be punished differently? As presidential pardons increasingly intersect with white-collar crime, the line between justice and influence continues to blur. And whether any of these 3 will walk free remains a decision resting with one person alone. If you would like to see more videos from us, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Like and share the video. It really helps us to grow. Thanks for watching.